Welcome to episode 4 of Tool Time with Professor Levy. Today we're going to talk some more about jigs. We started exploring jigs in our last video, but there are so many jigs that we can make in the shop. There are so many jigs that I don't have in the shop, so we're going to explore making a jig for the jigsaw to be able to cut circles or radius with. Cutting radii and circles are one of the harder things to do accurately in building in technical theater. So when we have a jig, it allows us to more accurately and more carefully create the circle or the arc that we are looking for. Here we have our jigsaw. We've talked about the jigsaw before, but I want to take a minute just to go over the different parts of it again. The jigsaw that we have is made by Bosch. There you go, Bosch. It's a fantastic brand of jigsaw. We're able to change, this is the foot. This is what rides along a piece of material that you're cutting on. We're able to change the angle of the foot so that we can cut an angle into that piece of wood. The jigsaw has a pistol grip that is activated by that red trigger. This is how you eject and replace the blades. And then, of course, coming out the back of it, we have the power for the jigsaw. The way we are going to build this jig for the jigsaw to be able to cut these circles is we're going to cut a piece of plywood and trap the foot of the saw inside of the piece of plywood and then give it a pivot point. So I've gone to my sheet goods rack and chosen a piece of scrap 3/4 inch plywood. The first thing I'm going to do, I know it's wide enough, I want to make sure it's a full sheet still. I want to make sure it's 8 feet long. I want this jig to be able to cut the largest radius and largest circle possible. And to keep it inside one sheet bit, that's an 8-foot sheet bit. It's 8 foot on both sides. One of the important things when finding the measurement on something, especially something long, is to keep your tape measure as straight and along one side as possible. This means that you don't get an inaccurate measurement. So we're 8 feet long. If I was to want to cut a radius or a circle with a radius greater than 8 feet, I would have to join more than one board together. That is something that we will do, but not in this video. So I'm going to set the fence of the table saw here to 8 3/8 inches. Right there. Even though I have a tape measure already built into the saw, and it tells me that I'm where I want to be, I do like to confirm that distance from the fence to the blade. And we're 8 3/8, what we want to be. The reason for that measurement will come apparent shortly. Lower the blade guard back down. Then I'm going to start the saw, let it come to speed, and rip my material. Let the saw stop and get my scrap material out of the way. Some of the things that I was paying attention to there were keeping my material securely against the fence here, making sure my hands were well away from the blade. There's a red area around the blade here that I like to make sure that nobody keeps their hands in there. One of the other things worth noting here is that when I set up to cut on the table saw, I don't keep the material on this side of the fence. I put the material I'm going to cut on the right-hand side of the fence, and that allows for two things to happen. When I start the saw and let it come to speed, the material is nowhere near the blade, so it's not going to accidentally get caught by the blade. And the fact that I have to reach for it and come back over here and feed it in allows the saw time to come to speed without me having to think about it. The next thing I'm going to do now is take some of the offcut that I just ripped and rip it down to 1 inch. I only need one rip. So there's my 1 inch. This is really close to the blade guard. So I'm going to turn the saw off. The power is now off. And I'm going to remove the blade guard. The reason for this is that it allows me to get closer to the blade with the fence and not come in contact with the guard. I'm going to put this on the right hand side. So we're locked back down with the faceplate. Set to 1 inch. We're going to confirm that. 1 inch. For the little amount that we need, 1 inch is going to be plenty. This is a circumstance where I'm going to use one of my sacrificial push sticks. I could get my plastic push stick through here, but it is close. So just for safety, I'm going to use the one that is able to come in contact with the blade. We're going to turn the saw on, let it come to speed. Let the saw power down. Move our scrap out of the way. We're just going to confirm the dimension on our piece of lumber. I'm measuring between an inch, between 4 and 5. This is called burning an inch, and it just gives you a bit more of an accurate measurement. So we're good. So I'm going to take this piece and the first piece we ripped and put it on the table. The next thing we're going to do is find some dimensions from our jigsaw and cut some of the 1 inch material to act as a little home base for the foot of the jigsaw. Back at our jigsaw with our tape measure and pencil, we're going to take a couple of measurements so that we know what we need to cut out of that 1 inch rip I made from the 3/4 plywood. So the foot is 6 3/8. So I need to cut 2 pieces at 6 3/8, and it is 3 1/8. So I need to cut 2 pieces at 5 1/8. Okay, now we're over at our compound miter saw. What we're going to do is get it set up. We haven't used it yet today, so we're going to pull that pin, which allows us to raise and lower the blade, turn it on. Okay, we are going to make the measurement for our first cut now. So we're going to cut 1 at 6 3/8 of an inch. So I have my fingers able to wiggle and nowhere near the trigger right now. That's because I'm lining up my cut and I don't want to be able to accidentally turn the saw on. I'm going to line up the outside edge of the tooth with my mark, which is there. I raise the saw back up, press the trigger to start the saw, and then complete my cut, like this. I'm going to label my piece, 6 3/8. They're both tiny and the measurements are going to be close, so it's going to be good to be able to identify them. So one more at the same measurement, 6 3/8. Again, fingers up while we line up the cut. And I'm going to label it again. And then our other measurement was 5 1/8. I wiggle the wood back and forward so I can move it just slightly. Okay, and cutting. It's always good to double check your measurements sometimes. 5 1/8. So we're going to label it. Labeling your pieces just allows you to know what they are without having to remeasure while you're in the middle of a project. It just makes things move a little quicker, especially when you have a lot of bits and pieces to what you're making. 5 1/8. Again, fingers up. And the line, cutting. And labeling, and we have our pieces. Okay, so to set this jig up and actually install the jigsaw onto this piece of plywood, I am going to remove the blade because it'll allow me to sit the jigsaw directly on the piece of lumber without it interfering, just like so. I'm gonna set the jigsaw aside for a second. I'm gonna grab an air hose down. I'm going to grab some glue and the narrow crown stapler, and we can get to putting this together. Okay, there's my air hose. I need the stapler and the glue. And we're ready to go. Connect the stapler to the air. Going to glue this because that way it will never want to move and be almost indestructible. So my 5 1/8, I'm going to line up with the edge of the base piece of plywood here. I've depressed the safety, so I'm being very careful to keep my finger away from the trigger and also my other fingers away from where the staple might fire. What I'm checking now is that everything is flush. I'm now going to fire just one fastener. And I'm checking again to make sure everything's nice and flush. Fingers well away from where it could fire. I'm gonna fire the second fastener. I'm being very deliberate about where these fasteners go. I have one at either end now, so it can't wiggle. And I'm just gonna put one in the middle. There we go. Now I'm going to grab one of the 6 3/8 inch pieces that we cut, and it fits in there nice and snug. I'm going to glue that up. Set it in place. And repeat the same process. Fire 1. Okay. Now we're just going to test fit the saw, make sure that everything is happy. So the saw is going to sit in here, like so. This one's going to cap, and the other one's going to sit snug up against the foot. This is perfect. I'm going to actually leave the saw in place. And I'm going to install the other longer piece first, glue. We're gonna snug it up to the foot and to the short piece. Fire 1. Fire 2, we don't worry about the piece that fell. And fire the 3rd. This way we just know that we can get the tool in and out of the jig. We want it to be very tight, but we want to leave a little bit of breathing room so we're able to lift it in and out. Okay, now we will put the final piece on the other end. Glue. Fire 1, and fire 2, and fire 3. So now we have captured our jigsaw. We can take it out, we can put it back in, but it doesn't move around. That's what we want. So the next step is going to be to index and drill a bunch of holes. Okay, so now what we're going to do is measure, mark, and drill a hole for the blade of the jigsaw to fit through in our jig. So I take my jigsaw, which is unplugged. I'm going to take the tape measure and carefully and accurately measure from the front of the foot to the leading edge or the front side of the blade. And that measurement is 1 inch and 1/8. 1 1/8 of an inch. The foot sits in here in our jig. So we are going to make a mark at 2 1/8. The reason we are marking at 2 1/8 is because we know that these pieces of plywood that we put on here to capture the foot are 1 inch wide. So that foot, the leading edge of the blade, sits here 1 1/8 of an inch back from here. I'm just going to, with the combination square, mark that. The next thing I want to know is the middle of that line that we just marked. So that is 3 1/16 of an inch wide. So the middle of 3 and a 16th. The middle of 3 is 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches in 30 seconds would be 16 30-seconds. So 1 and 17 30-seconds. That's a really tough measurement. So we're, for this, guessing in between the 1.5 inches and the 1 9/16 is going to be just accurate enough for us. That gives me about 1.5 inches on either side. So that's great. So I have already selected a drill bit that is, well, I'll show you. This drill bit is wider than the blade, so it will allow the blade to pass through it. So I'm just going to take a measurement of the blade, of the drill bit, which is 3/8, and I'm gonna mark 3/8 away from this line here. So I'm burning 1 inch or 2 again. And that just tells me where my drill bit needs to sit, because my hole I am aligning so that the leading edge of the blade is on the front side of the hole. So now I can see where to put the drill bit. This precision here is actually fairly important because everything from this point on correlates to where the leading edge of that blade is. So we're gonna give a couple of bursts just to start this hole without the drill bit wandering. So now I'm registered, I can sink the hole. If my hole isn't quite large enough for the saw blade to fit through, I can then what we call ream it out with a slightly bigger bit. But the first thing we're going to do is just check and see if we did this correctly, and it's perfect. The jigsaw blade fits perfectly through. The leading edge of the blade is almost touching the edge of the hole we just created. So we have done this accurately, which is great. So now what we would do is I'm going to set my combination square so that it is the same 1 1/8 measurement that blade leading edge is. This is, the combination square is indexed so that you can set a measurement from it. It's hard to see, the number that I'm looking at is on the other side of the blade from where the raised section is, so it's hard to tell. So now what I'm going to do is move these things out of the way. I'm going to flip this board around. And then I'm going to draw the line all the way down to the foot, like so. And then we're going to draw it back just because we bump into the foot. Okay. So I now have a line that is okay, so I now have a line that I've scribed using the combination square that runs all the way down the length of our jig, all the way to where the jigsaw sits. That line is in line with where our okay, as you may be able to see, I just scribed a second line on the jig because I made a mistake. The measurement for this line should have been 2 1/8 of an inch, not 1 1/8 of an inch. Now this actually lines up with the hole where the jigsaw blade goes through, the leading edge of that. So this line that we have just created, I'm going to index with some markings every 6 inches or a foot so that we have easily identifiable places to put a screw through, and that will be the pivot point for our jig. Okay, so now what we're going to do is measure and index some markings and holes for screws that we will potentially use through the life of this jig. So what we need to do is measure from the center of the hole we created for the jigsaw blade. So I've lined that up, so I'm going to mark it 6 inches. And then I'm going to reset my combination square here so I can draw a line at 6 inches. Now I'm just going to go down the length of my jig here, put another mark at 6 inches, 1 foot, 2 foot, 2 foot 6, 3 foot. And I just moved that a little bit, so we're going to recheck that we're accurate. And my pencil is getting dull from all this marking, so I'm now going to sharpen it. It's really important to me to have a super sharp pencil. That way the lines that I'm laying out are always very accurate. And remove that again. That's still lined up. 3 foot. We're angling. Like I said before, it's important for the tape measure to run straight. Now we're running straight. 3 foot 6. 4 foot. 4 foot 6. 5 foot. 5, 6. 6 foot. 6, 6. 7 foot's the last one that we're going to get on this. So now I'm going to lay out all of these lines. I missed one. When I'm laying out a lot of lines like this, I tend to spin the pencil. That way it helps the lead of the pencil wear evenly. we're going to grab our tape measure. The distance between these two is a foot, which is right. We're going to mark back at 6 inches where we should have had a line, and add our last line. What I will do at a later date is to mark each of these lines with the radius that they will produce if you were to screw into these points. That way, when we grab this jig to make arcs with or circles with, we will know what these lines actually mean. I will get rid of this line that no longer means anything and is inaccurate, in fact. The radius point, or the point of where the screw needs to be driven in order to turn this, needs to be in line with the leading edge of the blade. Otherwise, your radius isn't going to be accurate. Because I drew these lines 6 inches apart from each other, that does not mean that those are the only radii that can be produced with this jig. Those indexed lines that I just created are merely a guide. Our radii that we generate for building platforms and such are always going to be very specific, but this way we know what these lines are and can quickly figure out where to mark and put our screw. The next thing we're going to do with this is actually set it up with a piece of plywood and cut an arc with it. I will show you how to find where the center point of an arc is, and we will scribe the arc, and we will cut the arc. Okay, so I have a piece of plywood that I have screwed to the table here, and I have created a large compass with a 4-foot radius set on it. So now what I'm going to do is put the pivot point of the compass where the line ends, and draw a line like so on the table. I'm going to come to the other side and do the same thing. And where those two lines intersect is where we will put the pivot point for our jigsaw jig. So I'm going to grab the screw gun, take this screw, because I indexed this, I know that this point here should be my pivot point. And I'm going to put that pivot point. I'll use this line. Okay, so now I've set my pivot point. And just looking at it, it looks like the hole that we drilled for the blade of the jigsaw travels over the line that was scribed the whole way. So I'm going to set my jigsaw into its little home, grab an extension cord, whenever I'm using tools that require an extension cord for power, I like to knot loosely the end of the extension cord and the tool. That way, as I pull against it, it can't come undone. So now we're gonna see if our jigsaw jig works. Okay, so we have our pivot point set up. We're gonna take our jigsaw jig for a run. Okay, and here is our piece of plywood that we just cut after having used the router jig. And as you can see, we have a perfectly smooth cut with no zigzagging off of where our line was drawn. We cut exactly to our line, and it is the perfect 4-foot radius cut. This is what the jigsaw jig allows us to do. If we were to do this by hand, we would have a lot of wandering along the line. It allows you to concentrate more on where your hands are. You can take your time with the cut. You can stop mid-cut and not worry about having to reposition perfectly. Using this jig allows us to make really pretty, smooth arcs for our scenery and not worry about messing it up. That's where we're going to leave off today with our episode on jigs. I just wanted to explore the making of a jig that was a little more complicated than the circ saw straight cut guide that we made last time. This is a jig that's going to be extremely handy for us in the shop moving forward. It will allow for the quality of our scenery to improve drastically and will make us safer and more efficient in what we do. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I certainly enjoyed making it for you. Thank you for watching.